Ledger is a writing podcast about the artful inclusion of the gross and the weird. I am your host, Austin Wilson. Welcome to today's show, where I am chatting with Ira Rat, the publisher, graphic designer, the editor, the owner, operator, creator of Filthy Loot, one of the coolest underground, weird, transgressive, misfit fiction publishers that is currently operating in the scene. And we chat about a lot of stuff, including, yes, disgusting and weird stuff, and the artful application of those things to stories, what might be too weird, and a lot of other stuff, including how writers, you really need to pay attention if somebody puts out a call for fiction. Let's say short fiction. They're like, we're doing a collection of stories about body horror or splatterpunk or 1980s skateboard fiction, and you send in a story that is instead about Star Trek fan fiction. Don't do that. Do not do that thing. Do not just submit blindly. Pay attention to the call. We talk about this a lot. We also talk about how being the owner of a publishing house has maybe not been the best thing for Ira's writing career as far as time. There's a lot to talk about because Filthy Loot does a lot of awesome stuff, including all of the amazing graphic design on the cover of all those books, which is typically done by Ira Rat himself. So a lot of stuff to get to. A super fun chat because I like Filthy Loot a lot and enjoy the stuff that they are putting out currently. Make sure you go to filthyloot.com to check it out and see about buying some books through their website. That's the best place to buy them, and that will get the most money to the writers. As for my work, yes, go to austinrwilson.com, check that out. Also go to mossheartbooks.com, my independent bookstore that I own with my wife. Check out what we have on there. I have a brand new print interview that I did with Thomas Mallon. He wrote a book called The Very Heart of It, one of my favorite nonfiction books that I've read of recent years. It is his diaries from when he lived in New York. It's like early 80s to early 90s, and it's fantastic. It made me feel so many different emotions. It's heartfelt and sad and been hilarious and kind of weirdly antagonistic in some places about other people within the literary fiction landscape. So super interesting. Check that out, mossheartbooks.com. Make sure you like, subscribe, share this podcast, all of that stuff. Follow us on Instagram at mossheartbooks. That's where all the posts about all this stuff go up. But as for now, here is my chat with Ira Rat from Filthy Loot Press. You're coming up on 8 years running Filthy Loot?
October will be 8 years, yeah.
That's pretty impressive for a small press that's doing the stuff that Filthy Loot does, underground horror.
Well, underground horror, transgressive fiction, a little bit of everything. We're also doing a little nonfiction now, so yeah.
I noticed that too. Yeah, I saw that on the website. And was that a natural extension of what Filthy Loot was already doing, or?
It was a natural extension, but also I went to the first VoidCon out in North Carolina. Oh, no, West Virginia.
Yeah.
And I saw basically this group talking about this subject of what we have in the first book we did, which was like You Never Had Wings.
Yeah.
About transformations in horror, and we basically I approached all of them to see if they wanted to do it and as a book, and that's how it came about.
That's awesome.
One panelist gets swapped out because they didn't want to do it at the last moment.
That sounds cool, though. That's not something that you would normally associate with underground and transgressive horror, which is a big thing that I wanted to talk to you about. That's why I reached out, because I love the stuff that Filthy Loot is publishing. And also, I mean, it's kind of shocking. The first time I ever encountered your stuff in person, like I had seen it online, and I was at the last bookstore in LA randomly while I was out there for a trip, and I came across a copy of Teenage Grave, and I was like, oh shit, I saw this online. I have to pick this up. So I kind of want to talk about first the way your experience with the reach of running Filthy Loot and what it's been like to get your stuff out there, because I haven't really talked to anyone who's been at the head of a publishing house and someone who is both writing like you are, but then also dealing with distribution and all of the stuff that writers kind of don't think about a ton, or some of them don't have to anyway. So talk to me a little bit about Filthy Loot growing and your reach and how what it's felt like.
Well, it started off small. It's just kind of snowballed from there. The simple version of the story is I had $50. I decided to put out a zine. It was the first issue of Fucked Up Stories 3 in the daytime. I just knew a lot of authors who weren't getting a lot of coverage, so I was just like, hey, I'll do this. I'll pay all the authors the little bit of money that I do have, and then I'll get some copies out there. And I just kept going from there. We did a couple zines, and then Sam Richard approached me about doing Laser Mall. He was just like, "What about an anthology that's just lasers, robots, and mall horror?" And I'm just like, "You already sold me like halfway through that conversation, so we might as well
I
do
was
it."
in at Lasers.
Yeah, but it was just slightly too long to do as a zine, so we ended up doing the size that we are doing now.
Is that, do you think, in the back of everyone's head when they're like, I'm going to do a zine? And like, is that a thing that we really have in the back of our brains the whole time? Where like, I'm going to do this zine and it's going to blow up? Or is that the opposite of what we want when we're sitting down to make a zine?
A little bit of both, I'm sure. A lot of my impulse to start the press was also I went to school for graphic design. That's my background, so I've always had this impulse to do book covers and zine covers and stuff like that. So it was just a way to get that outlet out there because after spending how much ever money on getting my graphic design degree, I'm not doing that as a day job. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, so having Filthy Loot come from, I mean, the zine, I think zine culture and the ways zines feel, not
Mm.
just physically, but also, metaphorically and all those things. I think that is still very present in how Filthy Loot feels
Huh.
to me.
Thank-
Um, is that did like when you made that transition where the side where you're like it's a little bit too long to be a zine, were you consciously like, I want this to feel still like a zine going forward, or were you like, all right, now it's time to get a perfect bound spine, we need to make sure this feels leveled up?
Well, even with that first zine, I was trying to make it look as good as possible. Unlike
Yeah.
it wasn't just like a cheap Xerox thing that you'd find that was talking about five punk bands that you've never heard of before. But yeah,
Yeah.
I never been a big fan of art that was just like, oh, I'm going to lower myself for the medium. I'm always trying to go slightly above what ever it's trying to be at the time. So
That's
whatever format
interesting.
it takes, yeah.
I like thinking about that, and specifically, I play a lot of tabletop role playing games and make like tabletop role playing game stuff, and there's at least a sector of that fandom where they're like, it doesn't matter if the art's good, like do your art for your zine, and then just put it out. It doesn't matter if it's good. And I think I kind of fall somewhere in the middle because I've made zines before where I'm like, if I worry about this art and if I worry that it's not good enough, I'm never going to finish this. So I'm always like trying to find a middle ground for myself.
Yeah, I've had a lot of authors that like before I even started the press, I read an author's arc, and he was just like, "Oh, tell me if anything's wrong." I'm like, "I found five spelling errors." He's like, "Oh, most books at least have 13. I'm good." I'm just like, I'll sit there and I'll pay my publisher, the company that publishes me $25 if I miss a period. So I'm just a little weird. I just want it to be as good as possible.
What's funny is for spelling errors, I want 0.
Yeah.
But for art, because I'm not an artist, like I'm if I'm going to do the art for myself, or if I'm gonna pay someone,
Mm.
I think my mind goes to the place where I'm like, this needs to look as good as freaking possible. But if I'm going to do the art, I'm like, well, I know I'm not good. So I can either finish it or not get it done because I'm worried that it's bad. I think that's probably more a me thing than anything else.
There is a reason why only two of our books that we've put out have an illustration that I actually did on the cover. I will do the thumbnail and I send it off to somebody who can do it better. Or if it's Photoshop, I'll do that. But if it's an actual illustration, I've only done two of them. And yeah, probably two of our least popular titles. Well, not least popular, but they're my own books. So like I don't push them as much as other people's books for whatever reason.
Is that because you don't like your illustration style, or just
Uh,
because you know you'll agonize over it?
uh, I do agonize over it, but I'm fine with what I did for those because I was trying to emulate something else rather than trying to like come up with like, oh, this is a brilliant new illustration style. So
Well, the graphic design and that overall visual feel of Filthy Loot is super noteworthy.
yeah.
I think it's one of the biggest selling points for people when they first see the stuff. I saw Teenage Grave and I was like, holy shit, that looks amazing. And that's when I like got sort of connected. And I'm curious how the genesis of that happened. Like you said, you went to school for graphic design. Were you writing that entire time also? Like how did those two things meet up as far as becoming Filthy Loot? Like were you always a writer?
I've always been a writer since grade school. I kind of stopped for a long time because I got into bands. I've been in several bands, and that took up a lot of my time. I ran a couple tiny little bedroom record labels, which kind of feeds into what I do with the press too. Basically, any independent musician knows it's just a money suck, and after a while, it's just like I can't do this anymore. So I just make music for me and put it up on Bandcamp and don't even pay attention to really letting people know about it. So
A lot of people would say that independently publishing underground and transgressive horror fiction is also a money suck. Is that not the experience?
it is, but at the same time, it's selling better than my music ever did. A lot of it's also that money wise, I'm the one doing the interior layout. I'm the one doing the covers 9 times out of 10. And other than paying editors, which I normally do through barter, a lot of it's just paying back the printer and the author. And as much as I can personally take on is what I do for keeping our costs down, so we don't have to sell the tiny books for like $17 or something ridiculous
Right.
like.
And also I think the differences between musicians, because I guess there's no, I mean there kind of is a built-in concept of like, all right, I'm going to take this on the road, meaning your music, or the other side of that being an author. Like obviously there are, people going on book tours and stuff, but I think, I don't know, is it different? Like can you just be a musician who never plays anywhere and an author who doesn't worry about being like public?
Well, musician wise, there are examples like Jandek, but it's one of those things where the mystery sold the records more than anything else.
Yeah.
He never did an interview. He never did publicity. Well, some of his covers were himself, but he just never like went out there to get famous. But the second they did a documentary on him, he started going out on tour. About they're like, oh, it's a mystery. Who is this guy? He's like, I'll just start doing shows. But then there's like the opposite, where it's like the Beatles stopped touring. It's just like they could because they were the Beatles. So
Right.
as far as authors are concerned, I think it's a little easier, but at the same time, I'm sitting out there. I'm doing at least 4 or 5 events a year, trying to get it out there. I'm driving all the way to Pennsylvania, the East Coast, Minneapolis. I actually started my own horror fest here in Iowa just to have something where I didn't have to drive 5+ hours to get to. So yeah.
Right. It's funny because that kind of connects up with you as a writer. On your website it says you're examining the exhibition of anonymity, and I feel like those things match up where it's like not worrying about being famous, but you do like I've talked about this on the show with a lot of other people, but like you still have to worry about people reading your stuff if you're wanting to sell it or like get people, as many people as possible to read it. And that conflict with being like underground, but not so far underground that your stuff is just in a drawer.
Yeah. The wording of that is obviously I went to art school, so yeah, I went a little far on that, but yeah, some of my like visual art had to do with anonymity, so that had to do with that too. But I can see how it really goes with being a struggling artist, musician, writer, whatever you want to be. So yeah.
Well, the one of the big reasons I reached out to you is underground horror and transgressive horror specifically. I feel like either it's bigger now than I've noticed before, or I've just particularly gotten connected to it more than I had previously. It's probably a little of both, honestly, but I was super interested in if we could talk about too weird. Is there anything that's too weird? Not necessarily specifically for filthy loot, but just the idea of transgressive fiction, and if there are rules. A thing that I kept returning to as I read some of the stuff that Filthy Loot puts out, or other publishers like Apocalypse Party and some other people who are doing transgressive weird stuff, I kind of started to contemplate if the only rules were if it's readable. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on if there is such a thing as too weird for transgressive, underground or cult, whatever label, horror fiction specifically.
Oh, when I first came into publishing, a lot of what was going on was called Bizarro. I don't know if you're familiar with that scene, but it's like trauma times 100, like
Yeah,
the Toxic Avenger, but even further out there. After a while of being in that scene, I kind of noticed the analogy I've stolen from the comic book author James O'Barr was basically 80s comics started looking weird because the people drawing the comic books grew up looking at comic books. So they like the anatomy was all off. Like the stomach was too thin to support the torso, et cetera, et cetera. And it
yeah,
was just no longer human anatomy. So with Bizarro, I kind of started noticing that people who were writing Bizarro were only reading Bizarro. So it became this feedback loop where it just became too over the top. And so,
yeah,
yeah, it can be too far out there and just almost nonsensical. But as long as there's like a sense of like, oh, this person is like trying to do like an Alice in Wonderland homage where it's just like, oh, everything is weird for this sake, or David Lynch type stuff. I get that, but after a while, it just gets into this feedback loop of like, how can I insert poop into this story? Okay, and it's just like. I think right when I started, there was an anthology that was nothing but poop stories, and I would constantly get them for every call after that. So
yeah.
people just had them in their drawer and was just like, "Oh, I'll send them this one." All right.
Yeah, that's like Gigi Allen. Like
Yeah.
Gigi Allen, where it's like the grossest, basest, most detestable thing. I have yet to encounter a story where that seems to be the reason for its existence, from where I can connect to it. And I know there are people who are like, "Oh, that movie looks horrible. I'm going to watch it." Or that thing sounds disgusting. I'm going to read it. So as you encountered Bizarro, and as you encountered the weird like urge to put poop in every story, and you started Filthy Loot, was your goal like, okay, we're going to separate ourselves from that, at least in the sense that we're going to focus on whether it's story or graphic design that supports our story? Or were you making a conscious effort to push yourself further away from Bizarro and sort of create your own niche? Or were you like, I know this other thing exists over here and we do just want to be transgressive, but not to the point where story suffers or just doesn't exist anymore?
The first thing I look for is good writing,
Yeah,
honestly. Basically, somebody asked me a long time ago how I decide what stories we put out. And I always like quote that Supreme Court justice was talking about pornography, where it's just like, when I see it, that's it. Or
when
I'm
you see it.
misquoting it. Yeah, I don't know when I see it. Thank you.
Yeah,
I have this like ideal of what I want, but it's always like a weird trying to get there as part of the process.
yeah.
I don't know if we've done a book that's 100% what I've ever, well, anthology wise. It's never been exactly what I imagined when I put out the call, but it's always been an interesting process. So.
I'm also interested in your like line of demarcation between literary, because you're also publishing what you list on the website as literary fiction or literary horror
Mhm.
versus I guess talk to me about that. Talk to me about that delineation.
It goes back to the people who only read the genre that they write.
Right.
With me, I've for the past almost 8 years, I've only read what gets sent to me because I have no time to read anything else.
Right.
So I I've always been a big fan of like J.G. Ballard, William Burroughs, Nate Lippens, who I actually put out, Jack Skelly. These people who are like a part of. Dennis Cooper's a prime example. He's a little bit more towards the horror side than a lot of the other people, just because he talks about serial killers and whatnot. But I've just always had, I don't know. Well, the first author I got into as a kid, like really got into, was Stephen King, and he's always had that demarcation where it's just like, oh, I'll write the body, but I'll also write it. So I always wanted to kind of bring that together. It's like it's hard to explain,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
but
Stephen King is a good example, I think, because he gets shit on by the literary writers, maybe not publicly or sometimes publicly. And then maybe the more transgressive authors think that he's soft or not crazy enough. And you're right, like The Body, or I mean, more recently, The Life of Chuck, which I just read this month, is a fantastic, like, literary story.
mhm.
And it's in a book with some horror stuff, but I do like the idea that someone can do both, and the idea that Filthy Loot would be publishing literary, like, fiction, whether it's horror or otherwise, makes total sense to me. And gosh, I really like thinking about that, what you said about people only reading the thing that they're writing. And I'm just so curious about when you can perceive, or if you can perceive as a writer, that you're just not consuming the right amount of different stuff.
Um, I don't have the answer to that. All I know is sometimes while reading, I'm just like, oh, this person, I know exactly the author that this person solely reads
Yeah.
because of their story. So it's just a diversification, just bringing something else to the table other than just what somebody else has already done for that genre. Even if it's just like, oh, I really like Kurt Vonnegut. I want to do the Kurt Vonnegut of horror. That's at least something different to me.
Yeah. And so how often do you think, or maybe do you, I guess, encounter authors where you're like, I have no idea where this person's coming from? Like, this is so out there and unique. Is that a common occurrence, reading stuff that you get submitted, or is it pretty rare?
It happens every now and then, but there's been a couple times where it's just like I start talking to them and I'm like, oh, that's just an author I've never read before. But at the same time, at least it's new to me. It's kind of one of those things. So,
Yeah. Is being a publisher, since you said you don't have time to read stuff other than the stuff that gets submitted, is
mhm.
being a publisher a good thing that happened to you as a writer, or a bad thing?
Kind of a bad thing. First of all, I don't have time to write. Almost everything that I've published since doing this had already been written, other than my books, Hares and Endless Now, which are what, like, combined total of 200 pages I've written in like 8 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I strongly agree. Going back to King and his book, he was just like, a writer should read. And I'm just like, yeah, you should read as much as you possibly can. And even with my submission pile, I try to squeeze in at least a book or two a year. I just exaggerate a little bit, but yeah.
Well, I mean, that you gotta do, like, that's
Oh
the
yeah.
other thing. I know you get so many submissions. I don't know, how many submissions do you think you get? Even if a call is not out, are you getting just a shitload of cold submissions, people not reading that you're closed for submissions? Are you just getting inundated with stuff, or is it?
Well, I'm never close for submissions, unfortunately. I in all the years I have not turned it off, so it's on me partially. But yeah, at least I'll get a short story or a novel pitch every day, at least. So probably more.
Yeah. How often does that turn into something? Like, how often does that turn into a thing you publish?
Last year we put out 11 books, I believe. It was every month except for December because I just didn't want to deal with putting it out. It was already in the chamber. I just couldn't put it out, just effort wise.
Yeah.
About half of them were individual novellas, and then or short story collections that were one author, which is not something I do very often. But then there's every short story collection I probably read at least 20, 30 stories for to get down to four or five. But when I do post that we have an open submission, which I've been quiet about the last couple of years just because of this happening,
Yeah.
I would get 200, 300 short stories, and almost all of them would be not on the subject that I put the call out for. So,
Not just completely not on the subject.
yeah.
That is fucking crazy.
It's more common than you probably would assume. I hear the same thing from other publishers, but it's just like, oh, I'm looking for transgressive body horror, and then I get Star Trek fan fiction. literally Star Trek fan fiction. So yeah, no.
That is
I
bonkers.
people think I'm a little bit of a stickler because I'm just sometimes I'll post no sci-fi, no erotica, no this,
Yeah.
no that. And just being extreme about it, but it's just because if I let that crack open just a little bit, sometimes people take it as a open call to send me the next Game of Thrones or something, where it's just like, oh, it's 100,000 words, and yeah, just not our thing. I'm not really into sci-fi. I'm not into fantasy. Well, I say that, but you can probably find a bunch of sci-fi references in almost everything that I put out. So,
I mean, knowing your audience, knowing what sells, knowing the stuff that you want to do, like you're in a position where you're running Filthy Loot. It is your publishing house. Like the idea that somebody would consider you a stickler for the thing that you own and run is wild.
you'd be surprised about that too.
Yeah.
The Star Trek one is an example. By I'll get stuff like weird fan fiction where it's like Lou Reed beating up and having sex with one of the other members of the Velvet Underground. I'm just like, okay, that's a choice, but I'm not going to put that out. All right,
I
but
guess so maybe that's why like the larger like conceptualization of what weird or transgressive is, where it's like not necessarily putting poop in every story, but being like, I have to make this as fucking weird as possible.
yeah.
And that to me seems like a backwards approach
Mm,
instead of being like, I have a story. And I don't know, I guess I'm so curious about the stuff that you get to read where it's like, this writer thought weird first instead of story first.
mm-hmm. Oh, that even goes back to one of my favorite writers, is William Burroughs, and it kind of rides that line. It's just like how much is he like writing towards his own public perception, where it's just like, oh, people think he's weird, so he just started like going with it. And I don't know. I kind of feel that same way about some later David Lynch things, where it's just like, oh, I can get away with it because I'm weird.
I always try to confront that, like, is there a story? What's the fucking
Mm.
story?
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I complained about the poop thing earlier, but I actually read a book. It's by Derek McCormick. That it the entire thing is one poop reference after another, but it's like at least artistic. I'm not going to say the name of the book because it has a pejorative in it, but yes.
at least artistic, one
All right.
poop reference after another, but is there a story in there?
Uh, yes, in so much as like a William Burroughs book would have a story where it's just like an abstraction, but at least it's like artistically done.
I'm so curious now. So, for anyone listening, don't submit something randomly. Make sure you're on the fucking call. Like you're paying attention to what is being asked for. I see that stuff when I'm submitting, and I've encountered it before where I'm like, I feel like this is the thing they're asking for. How egregious is it? I mean, because the things you're describing, very, very egregious,
Oh,
but like interpretations as far as writers being like, well, I am writing this thing. And I mean, I guess you probably already answered this. The idea of people submitting crazy shit.
but there are people who send me things that are slightly off. Them like, oh, that might actually work for this other thing I've been thinking about. So I
Yeah.
don't mind when it's just like, oh, it's transgressive body horror, but it doesn't have anything to do with one of my last anthologies was New Meat in a Cold Room, clean room, where I wanted it to be like splatterpunk, post punk, and weird comedy and body horror, where it was just like philosophical leanings and like Joy Division references. If like you sent to that and it didn't have anything to do with like old 70s post punk, I would still be like, oh, well, I have another issue of body punk coming out. Maybe I'd consider that.
It's an interesting, yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah. Don't. It's such a weird balance to try to strike as
Yeah.
a writer submitting to stuff. And the things that I've seen you do as far as doing your calls, where you're like, here's a page of inspirational imagery, or showing people things that relate to the words that you're using as defining the genres. I think that's super helpful, and especially with genres like splatterpunk or post-punk and stuff that does have definitions but can shift
Oh, yeah.
from reader to reader.
when some people talk about splatterpunk, it could be like Clive Barker, where it's still kind of classy, but it's like pretty far out there. But or someone like Edward Lee, that's just like pretty far to almost bizarro in its extremity. Where it's just like I'd be a little bit more inclined to the Clive Barker. I like Edward Lee, but
There's a bookstore I love in Chicago called Bucket of Blood, and there's
oh
a
yeah,
couple of shelves in Bucket of Blood that I always look at. I haven't gotten anything yet because most of the time the stuff that I encounter there, I'm just like, this is so far over lines I didn't know existed that I bought a book called Burn You the Fuck Alive, which I haven't read yet, but it was one of those. It's by B.R. Yeager. I think
yeah.
Apocalypse Party put that one out as
Mhm.
well. But it was one of those where I'm like, this is like as far out as my brain is willing to go, and I'm excited to take this journey, and it's a chance because I might hate it. I don't know.
Yeah, there's things that I try to push myself into, kind of like that. John Steffens and I actually wrote an entire book of movie reviews for extreme horror books, extreme horror movies,
Yeah.
because of the Iceberg that came out years ago. That was the disturbing movie Iceberg. I'm like, I don't really get extreme horror. Maybe I should watch a bunch of these movies and figure out if I like it or not. And that's where that book came from. And after a while, it's just like, how many fake snuff films can you watch? But it was still an interesting experience. I now know that there's a line where I'm just like, this is what I don't like about extreme horror, and it's like the whole. And I'm not calling anybody out because I've gotten this like idea a few times. It was like it's a book, but every chapter is another red room. And it's just like death after death after death, no plot, just death after Rube Goldberg death. It's just like I just don't care after a while because I need to care about somebody or something in the book or story.
That's a perfect sentence right there, because that story, like
Yeah.
if you're just writing something that has no stakes,
Mhm.
and to me it's not hard to write murder after murder after murder after murder, like just death death death. Like it is hard to make the reader care,
Yeah.
and to make them want to go with these people into this like fictional world. And I think extreme horror, gosh, that if someone would have asked me if extreme horror films and like transgressive horror stories were the same thing, I think previously I would have said, well, it depends on a ton of shit, obviously. But in the email I sent you originally, I mentioned Terrifier, and
Mhm.
Terrifier being one of those things that doesn't seem like mainstream horror to me, but is playing in mainstream horror, like in mainstream movie
Right.
theaters. I'm interested in the ways in which that movie like leapt over this line.
You go to Walmart and they have merchandise for Terrifier right next to the Stranger Things things right now. So yeah, it's like somehow jump that gap where it's just like, how did a movie that would have been regulated to the Grindhouse circuit 20 years ago? Well, it had been longer than 20 years ago for Grindhouse, but you get what I'm saying.
Right.
Is now like a blockbuster level thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's wild.
Yeah, I've watched the movies and I enjoyed them while I'm watching them, but it's one of those things I don't know if I'd actually rewatch personally, just because I I like the idea more. Well, I like the execution more than I like the idea, which is kind of backwards to normal. But yeah,
Well, I haven't seen any of them. That's not the stuff that I like am drawn to film wise, which is strange because I am drawn to it in books, and I'm like, that movie made that much money? That's crazy.
I think it's a zeitgeist thing because like clown horror is extremely popular right now. Extreme horror is extremely popular right now. There's whole Facebook groups are filled with people who are just gobbling up anything that comes out in that genre. The only things that I've like watched or for that book that I wrote, the only things I've read have been like submissions, and I also read Womb. I'm trying to remember who wrote that one. It was viral for a moment. It was all right. It was pretty good, but it wasn't my thing. And like I just want there's like I said before, there's a delineation between the like splattery stuff that I like and some of the more out there things that just get too involved in the death rather than the people.
No, I think that's probably a good way to put it, and that is a weird part of horror because some extreme horror that I've seen, and I probably have seen like 0.01% of extreme horror, and
Mm.
probably stuff that now people would be like, "Oh, that's not extreme," which I'm okay with. Like, because I watched, God, I think it's a French film, High Tension. Not for me, to put
Yeah.
it mildly. And partially it was because I thought the story was really stupid. Um, but I mean, it's
I've heard that complaint. I haven't watched that one, so yeah.
I think extreme horror, like zeitgeisty, like you said, well, one clown fiction. What a strange sub genre to have explode and kind of again, like not even for the first time, like again.
Everything goes back to it, I would say, but and that was what based off of Gacy, so it's tapping into something that bothers people. So I get it, but it's just not my thing. Fully support anybody who wants to go there, but it's not for me.
Is there any? I mean, I think we already did kind of talk about whether there are things you won't publish at Filthy Loot, but the idea of extreme horror in Filthy Loot or utilizing, like, because you said you look for writing, like
No,
that you want strong writing, and because you're the editor, like you're the person at Filthy Loot who is selecting what's coming. Like, is it literally just you?
it's for picking what we put out. Yes, I do. Have a lot of help from Amy and Vaughn for like line editing and stuff like that. But like the actual selections, it's me.
Yeah.
So, and I have put out two books I would consider extreme horror. But they're The God in the Hills by John Steffens. I always say that they're H.P. Lovecraft writing "I Spit on Your Grave," but uh, we coined the term "cosmic snuff" for it because, uh, it was basically while reading it though I was like, oh, what this book is actually tapping into is like generational trauma, patriarchy, critique, stuff like that, and it's not just like, oh, big scary rapey monster. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked if the word transgressive is misinterpreted by a lot of writers and readers.
Good.
The things that are transgressing outside of norms within our culture. I guess as a writer, how would you want writers to interpret the word transgressive who are submitting to Filthy Loot?
That's a good question. I go back to I know when I see it.
You know,
So yeah, I there's this quote, and sorry for not remembering who said it. I like crossing the line because I like remembering that I have a line in the first place. So I will like follow a writer down that hole, but afterwards I'm just like, that's not for me. All right,
yeah.
but it's just, yeah, I don't know where I would place that line, because part of where we got our name is my obsession with John Waters. So like, uh, one of my heroes is somebody who put a drag queen eating a dog turd at the end of the movie just to get more people into the seats. So I can't really complain too much about bad taste.
What's funny though is John Waters is always he's a coin toss for me. It just depends. But seeing some of his stuff, Hairspray, or weirdly, the first one I ever saw, I don't know, my parents ended up with it. I watched Serial Mom when I was probably like 11, whenever it came out. Like I saw Serial Mom, and which to me is kind of a straightforward, not straight, as straightforward as possible for John Waters film, but it's not as what I would consider transgressive as the other stuff, obviously. Um,
At the point in his career, he went from transgressive to satire, I think, which there's like a blurry line in between those two as
yeah,
well. So
I think that's a good point. That blurry line between transgressive and satire, and based on stuff that I know Filthy Loot has put out, that kind of seems pretty accurate to the stuff that you're doing. That you're writing that line between satire and transgressive.
Oh yeah, especially my own writing. People always point out that like I hate the term horror comedy, but people are like, "Oh, it's comedic." I'm just like, yeah, I put a lot of jokes in my books, but it's not like Saturday the 14th type horror
Yeah.
comedy. Yeah.
Why do you hate the term horror comedy?
Well, no, not even the term. It's just the connotation. I grew up with the horror movies like Saturday the 14th or Transylvania 65000, where it was just like a little too slapsticky. Well,
Yeah.
even like into scary movie territory, where it's like a little too like the balance is always off when you try to do horror comedy. You either go too horrific or you go too comedic. Meanwhile, I just like writing things that are like people. I've had people even say I don't write horror, so I don't even know what to say about my own writing. But
Oh, strange.
yeah, well, it's always the thing. I write things that whatever the person I'm talking to doesn't write. It's just like, oh, this isn't going all the way back to Bizarro. This isn't Bizarro. This is horror. And then I'm talking to a horror person. Oh, this isn't horror. This is literary fiction. I'm just like, oh, okay. So I'm just not whatever you're doing. Okay.
So I guess one of the bigger questions as we're kind of wrapping up now is, did you start? I mean, we talked a little bit about starting Filthy Loot because you had the idea for the zine, but like, had you been submitting your work previously to other publishers? How did that tie into Filthy Loot becoming a thing? As far as like, well, there's a couple questions in here. Since you said it's been bad for your writing, how much was that tied to like nobody is publishing the shit that I want to see, or maybe tied to that nobody is publishing my work, which is I think a thing that writers tend to shy away from sometimes talking about out loud.
There's a little bit of that in there. I was publishing and getting accepted. What there was an anthology, Deep Fried Horror, that I was in. Bizarro Central had a short story that they would just publish. I got and then a couple zines. Uh, this is since my current writing phase. I have a bunch of stuff from like the early 2000s that thankfully are just nowhere
Yeah.
to be found. I had two manuscripts that I had. One was the short story collection Pacifier, which got accepted. And then after about 6 months, the publisher who was putting it out ceased publication. And then I also had the novella that I'd been working on for a couple years. I wrote it in like 2 weeks, and it took me years to edit, even though it's like 100 pages. Uh, Basically, that had to do with hiring a bunch of the wrong editors, and then one right one who still was just like, "You have this major problem, but it's too big for me to sit here and
Yeah.
show you." Just past tense, present tense problems. Uh, and I sent that one off to a publisher who rejected it, and basically between having both of those in my hands at the same time, I'm just like, I can just put this out. I already put in the money. I might as well try to do it. So those were what, like maybe the third and sixth or seventh book that we put
Yeah.
out. So
Well, now in
yeah.
2026, I mean, even into 24 and 3 and stuff, the idea of self pub having been kind of sandwiched together with indie, and it is an interesting time right now when you can self-publish stuff and have a lot more reach than even 10 to, I mean, definitely 15 years ago. But even then, self-publishing, you still had more reach than previously. So now I'm curious if Filthy Loot as a boutique press is an answer for people who are like, I don't have enough time to self-publish. I guess the big question is like, how big do you want filthy loot to get? Is it a thing where you're like, I have a ceiling and I'm not going to go past this because of availability, because of implications as far as publishing industry, like trends and all of the shit that comes with a publisher being of a certain size?
Last year, putting out those 11 books, that was
Yeah.
too much. So I will probably never go above 11 books again for just quantity wise. But I am constantly pushing our books into any arena that I think that we will sell more copies. Um, Originally, when we first started, I was completely anti Amazon. I still am anti Amazon, but some of the authors were like, "Oh, we heard that we can sell more," and I'll show you the $3 royalty check that I got yesterday if you want to know how much Amazon is getting us. But we're making a few $1,000s a month now. It's not like earth
Yeah.
shattering, but it's a pretty good amount.
Since I run a small bookstore with my wife and we use Ingram, I'm curious about distributing stuff through a smaller press. And we don't have to go too into the weeds on it, but you said you made a deal with who was it?
Yeah, we made a deal with Asterism where they're doing a lot of distribution to bookstores, and that's been really good. They're doing a lot better than having our stuff on Ingram has ever been. So, a distro out of Seattle.
Seattle.
Mhm.
And also, yeah, Amazon. I hate Amazon at just about as much as possible. I think they're pox on the publishing industry and books in general. But I also think we're at a point where we have to address what they offer. Like, there are plenty of people who have self-published stuff through, well, not plenty, but significant people who have published stuff through Amazon and blown up to the point where quote unquote mainstream publishing has taken no and then you know sold millions and millions of copies. And it's I've talked about it here recently with some writers that I know that about distribution and awareness and how that machine offers things that are not exclusive to Amazon anymore. You can distribute stuff very easily through your website, through Gumroad, through all these other places. And I'm curious about the ways in which Filthy Loot has, and I mean, you've sort of already answered it with Asterism Books talking about how it's been much more popular than Ingram. I've gotten some of your stuff through Ingram, but I am curious if those distribution models are going to become Ingram and other distros become less and less of a priority or even a less and less of a presence within publishing.
I can see that. I actually got a message the other day that I had sent out one of our books for review, and our Amazon page wasn't up to snuff, apparently, according to the reviewers, or they weren't going to review it. But at the same time, I pay so little attention to Amazon that it's not even really on my radar. I'm trying everything I can to avoid having to deal with them as much as possible, but they are the elephant in the room that you kind of have to appease. But
Well, that is also an interesting aspect of it, the review aspect of it. I despise Amazon reviews. I think they're bullshit, and I think it's a false metric that the industry has adopted and sort of pushed on people. And their purchase of Goodreads is one of the worst things that could have happened to the publishing industry. Anyway, achieving review success or connecting with readers through reviews, is there another place that Filthy Loot does care about? And I'm literally asking just for the interest of readers or writers out there. Is bookshop.org a place that you notice helps Filthy Loot, or is there no place like that right now?
Not specifically. I have a thing where I try not to even look at our reviews just because otherwise I go down that rabbit hole where I'm just like, why did I get this one 3-star review? So I don't even pay attention to things unless it's like a long written blog post. I will read those because people have taken their time
Yeah.
and put consideration into it. So I always appreciate that.
So wrapping up right before we get into where people can find you online, as a writer, as now a publisher, and a reader, what do you tell people as far as, or what would you tell people as far as dealing with rejection? How do you think about rejection as all of those different things? A publisher, a reader, writer. Is it the same thing to all three versions of yourself?
I would say that 99 out of 100 rejections have nothing to do with the quality of work whatsoever. It has to do with the submission call, my little narrow view of what I'm trying to do, and just like, I don't know, just things like that. It's very
Yeah.
nitpicky rather than, oh, you're a bad writer. So I'd say keep writing, keep putting things out because the whole reason why I started this is because almost every author that I knew at that time was complaining that other presses weren't putting out the type of things that they were trying to put out there, and I had already enjoyed their work. So
yeah. I think that's good advice. Where can people find Filthy Loot online, and where is the best place to buy Filthy Loot books?
Well, filthyloot.com is probably the best place to buy books, just because it gets more money to the authors. But I'm happy if you buy it anywhere. So
Yeah.
we are also we're on almost every social media at Filthy Loot, but we mostly focus on Instagram because we're such a visually present company. So
Yep, and the visuals are awesome.
oh, thank you.
I appreciate you coming by. I appreciate you chatting. And yeah, go filthyloot.com. Check out Filthy Loot books. Thank you so much to Ira Rat for stopping by and chatting. Go to filthyloot.com. Check out those books. Some awesome stuff there. You're going to find weird stuff if that's what you're looking for. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate every second you spend with this show. If you want to like, subscribe, review it, share it, I would appreciate that a ton. Go to my website, austinrwilson.com, mossheartbooks.com. Check that stuff out. Follow us on Instagram at mossheartbooks. I'm recording this on February 2nd, and I wanted to leave this until the last so I didn't hijack the episode or draw away from Ira himself, but fuck ICE. The country's in a really dangerous place right now, and I want to make it as clear as possible that I am not on the side of the fascists. Fuck you, ICE.